Yo, yo, what up, y'all? It's your boy Fro, and today I'm going to be talking about the 2025 film The Gorge, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller, directed by Scott Derrickson, who also directed Sinister, Deliver Us from Evil, and Doctor Strange. So ain't nothing to it but to do it. Now, when we start off, we see Miles Teller's character Levi, and his character is very well respected and trained in a kill shot. In fact, he's about top five in the world, what he says later in the film, but he's kind of maneuvering through life on autopilot, if you will. And he really gets a spark again when he meets Anya Taylor Joy's character, Draza, the Lithuanian woman that's appointed on the other guard tower. Now, ultimately, we come to find out that the government is super corrupt and they're the ones responsible for keeping what secret contained inside of the gorge. And they hire these really trained skilled operatives, if you will, appoint them on these towers. They spend about a year or so. They cut off all kind of contact for the most part. And right when they're finished with the job, the government murks them. And I thought it was pretty cold blooded, to be honest. There's a guy named Jasper who acts as Levi's predecessor, and he gives Levi all the info that he needs, although it's a bit limited, for the gorge and what he's about to get himself into. I didn't expect Jasper to get killed so quickly because I thought the actor was doing a pretty good job with what he was bringing to the character. And ultimately, come to find out, it's a really limited role, about maybe 4 or 5 minutes of screen time, if that. But I definitely like this character. Maybe I would have liked to see just a little bit more from him. They're both appointed to guard towers on opposite directions, and the only direct communication that they both have through the first half of the film is writing messages on whiteboards and looking through binoculars. And I really like this decision. Of course, the movie is going to have to find some way for us to care about them and for them to grow closer. But personally, it worked for me. Now, I will admit, I felt like it was really reminiscent of the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead because Ving Rhames and Andy, the owner of the gun store in that film, are pretty much doing the same thing. They're even playing chess as well while writing messages on their whiteboards. So despite how reminiscent it felt, I did enjoy this decision here in the Gorge. We see title cards flash on the screen, the months go by, January, February, March, and Draza and Levi eventually couple together. They find a way to get across the other side. They have a grappling hook. Levi shoots it and manages to climb across. And there's some really cool, creepy shots of when Levi is looking down and the huge gorge with this thick cloud of fog and smoke is pouring out. And there's a couple moments in this film that I thought Scott Derrickson did a good job with building the tension and psyching me out a couple times too, because when I was expecting a couple jump scares, they didn't come. And then when I wasn't expecting a specific jump scare, it got me. And I hate jump scares overall. I hate them. But I thought one was a little bit effective, and it's when Draza is looking down. We hear one of the Hollow Men, which I'll get into in a second, creeping around underneath her. And then right when she looks over the ledge, we see this. Although it's CGI, it worked for me. The hand pop right out, and a really cool horror-esque moment. And speaking of which, there were a lot of sequences peppered throughout that I felt Scott Derrickson was pushing on his horror territory because that's what we're usually known from him. You know, Sinister, Deliver Us from Evil. He makes really creepy films. Man, a lot of them are rated, despite Doctor Strange and Exorcism of Emily Rose. Another thing I found to be effective, speaking of a horror type of feeling, is the original soundtrack, which really reminded me of the Sinister score that I also really enjoyed. I find that one to be a very underrated piece of score. Now, I think Scott Derrickson, again, really utilized the experience that he has with some of his horror films that he's been directing, and he poured just a bit of it into this movie, especially with a lot of the imagery, too, that we come to see when both of our characters find themselves trapped in the gorge at one part of the film. And I really love a lot of the creature design. And I'm not the biggest CGI guy. I love my practical effects. But this movie does have a bit of exception for me because I did find a lot of the design to be rather unsettling, especially for an action sci-fi PG-13. I wasn't expecting a lot of the horror elements. So again, hats off. That was one element of the film that I really appreciated, if you will. I am a big fan of Sigourney Weaver. My favorite role of hers being Ellen Ripley, of course, from Alien specifically, the second film. One of my favorite movies of all time. So it was really cool to see her pop up, but she was definitely playing a villain that I have seen her do a couple times already in a good chunk of her filmography. And it's not a dig at her at all. Weaver is awesome. I love Sigourney, but again, I felt like she was kind of there. She might have taken a paycheck. It kind of felt like that a bit. And maybe it can be the script's blame specifically for her character. I felt like maybe she wasn't given that much material to work with other than the typical villain that we have seen a couple times already, the secretive head honcho. Now, I've already been spoiling a ton throughout the review, but if you don't want to get spoiled, click off and come back after you watch the movie when you get a chance. But ultimately, we find out that some of the monsters in the gorge are some of the soldiers from the First World War, first infantry soldiers. And the look of them reminded me of an evil, more creepy Pirates of the Caribbean. And I'm not sure still to this day about how I feel about the overall appearance and design of them. I do like the Hollow Men for the most part. I do wish everything was a bit more practical, but just judging on the overall creepy nature of what they're doing, I would say the Hollow Men and the spiders with skulls on top of them and that attack scene really stood out to me. We have a really cool scene that I can understand if some people find it to be ridiculous, but R2 find a Jeep at the bottom of the gorge. They manage to attach a type of wire or rope to it, and the Jeep starts to travel up the wall of the gorge inch by inch. And Draza and Levi are fighting the Hollow Men and a couple of the other monsters while the Jeep is going up. And I found this to be a really good scene. I thought it was pretty effective for me. Again, I can understand that some people are like, that's pretty dumb, but I liked it. R2 discover a laboratory that's at the bottom of the gorge, and some of the technology and computers there have been there as early as the 2000s. So they're pretty surprised to even find some updated technology there in the first place. They find a projector tape that's one of the very first ones created down there. They play it, and we see this lady scientist that's explaining the procedures that went wrong and what's going on ultimately in the gorge. I don't want to spoil too much. I want to leave some room for you guys to check it out. But overall, I really enjoyed the gorge. Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller work very well together, and this might be my favorite Anya performance. I am a fan of hers and a lot of acting choices that she's been making recently. Off the top of my head, I would have to say her role as Draza stands out the most to me. She gets to flex a Lithuanian accent, and she has a lot of fun with some really badass moments. One in particular when she looks down at the gorge and Levi is trapped down under, and she says, F it, I'm gonna go anyway. And she jumps right in. I thought that was a really cool moment. So again, really badass scenes and work from her. Miles Teller does get the shine at playing this really trained kill shot sniper. And again, the pairing was really nice, and the sci-fi elements, the horror elements that Scott Derrickson brings to the table. I'm gonna give The Gorge about an 8 out of 10. And that's it, y'all. It's your boy Fro. What did you think about this movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Not your cup of tea? Did you like it more than I did? Did you not like it as much? Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, between time, I'm on to the next review. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm out. Bonk.